Hello and welcome to part 3. I want to start this section first of all by defining quality and think about in your head what you'd call quality, and most of us have got some kind of notion of quality, but in reality, or the science shows us that there's multiple definitions of quality and different people think about quality differently in different situations, right? So I want to present to you the three approaches to quality. So not only is there more than 3 definitions of quality, there's so many different perspectives of quality or definitions of quality that we can actually group them into 3 different approaches. So first one is the transcendent view of quality, and this is synonymous with innate excellence, a mark of uncompromising standards and high achievement. This viewpoint is often applied to the performing and visual arts. It argues that people learn to recognise quality only through experience gained from repeated exposure. All right, so the more experience, the more refined you are. Now I'm going to think of wine here, right? So the first time you taste wine, you're not going to have any idea what's going to be a quality wine and what's not going to be a quality wine, because it's just wine. It's the first time you've tasted, right? But then as you get older and you get classier and snobbier and stuff like that, you drink more wine, and you know, you talk about all the aromas and the fruitiness of it and all that sort of stuff. You get exposed to it more and more and more, and then your palate gets refined, and you go, well, this is a really good wine for this and this and this reasons, right? And that's the same with other products as well. I think about computer products. The more you use computer products, the more you realise which CPUs and graphics cards are better and why they're better and what makes them better. So through repeated exposure of these products, you get better at determining which ones have these transcendent, these functional views of quality, right? And they can still be quite subjective in one way, but it's a very refined skill from our customer's perspective, right? Now, that's one view of quality. Another view is the product-based approach. Now, it sees quality as a precise and measurable variable. Differences in quality argues reflect differences in the amount of ingredient or attribute of the product. Because this view is totally objective, it fails to account for differences in the taste, needs and performance of individual consumers or even the entire market segments. Now, this is quite a common one, and it gets used a lot. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you are with industry standards and stuff like that, but we develop a lot of them. We've got this whole suite of things called Australian standards or international standards, and what we try and do is we try and document that and go, this is the minimum, or this is the Australian standard for that product category. And in construction, we've got heaps of them. So we've got an Australian standard for timber framing, we've got an Australian standard for concreting, we've got an Australian standard for tiling, we've got an Australian standard for masonry work. We've got Australian standard for designing buildings, we've got Australian standards for procuring, like tendering, stuff like that, and it goes everywhere. For helmets, like bike helmets, we've got to have Australian standard for that. We've got Australian standard for life jackets. We've got Australian standard for just about, like so many of them. And the whole idea of that is researchers go in there and go, well, what is quality? And if we use these Australian standards, it provides some guidance, one, for producers to set a standard for them to benchmark to, right? So you go, well, this is the Australian standard or the international standard. Let's work to that standard, right? And then you'd go, if that's the standard, you would expect the customers to be happy if it meets that standard, right? Right? No, not really, right? And that's the problem with this one, because it's objective. And although it tries to objectify it as much as possible so that it'll capture the the average, or it would be more than the average, but like the general consensus of the industry of what standard, and all the technical experts and the producers and stuff like that. Just because the industry agrees at that standard doesn't mean to say that that's what our customers expect as standard, right? And that's a really painful thing to learn as a business, because you could be delivering everything to standard or above standard, but your customers still struggle with it because they're dissatisfied because their expectations do not align with the industry standards. And how would they know? Like, it's not like if they're buying a product, how would they be expected to know every standard for that product? I mean, the reason why they're buying it is because they don't want to produce it themselves or deliver it themselves, right? So that they're paying you to do that. So while you might be the industry expert, you can't expect your customers to be. So this product-based approach is used a lot. It's very functional, it's very objective, but it's got some massive limitations when it comes to marketing. And I really want to emphasize that, because as business practitioners, you can spend a lot of time in this area getting very very frustrated because you're doing all the right things and things still aren't going well. So that leads us to the next approach, which is where we should be in marketing, really. Like, this is the baseline product for us, like the product-based approach. So the transcendent view is kind of like a classy view. I say snobby, but I mean that in a loving way. Like, because it's from repeated exposure, the better you get at things, the better your understanding of what quality is, right? So it's a bit snobby in that way because you have a better view of quality because you're better experienced with that product, right? The product-based approach is the most functional one, gets used the most, and we should be at that one there at a minimum, right? But really where we should be working with the most, what's going to have the most impact for us as marketers, is this user-based definition. Because it's no longer about what we do, but how our customers perceive it, what we do, right? And it starts with the premise that quality lies in the eye of the beholder. It's very subjective, which it is. These definitions equate quality with maximum satisfaction. This subjective demand-orientated perspective, so demand-orientated, so already, highlighting the fact that we're involved because it's about demand, recognises that different customers have different wants and needs. And indeed, like at this stage of marketing, you should be well and truly aware that a lot of marketing comes down to needs and wants, and different customers have different needs and wants, different segments have different needs and wants. It's just so diverse. I spent a lot of time on that because you can have a big impact on your business or the business that you work for if you can understand that concept. And the engineers are going to be working in the product-based approach. Your research and development team is going to be working the product-based approach. Your production manager is going to be working the product-based approach, right? So a lot of your business is going to gravitate towards the Australian standards, the international standards, this product-based approach. It's our job to lift our organisation beyond that into these user-based approaches. That's why I'm so strong about that. All right, so let's look at the dimensions of service quality. This is rock solid theory. It's been around for quite a while, and not only is this theory very, what we call seminal theory, like it's theory that we build on into the future as well. So it comes back in many different forms. Now, this is called the 5 dimensions of service quality. Often we use the acronym RATER. Now, this is a new thing. So when it came out, I can't remember the dimensions, what order that they came out in, but it wasn't in this order. Because the research just, is not working out how to remember things, it's working out how to know things. So once the knowledge was produced and then we started teaching it, we've worked out, well, it wasn't me, it was like done years ago in textbooks, they've worked out, well, if we adjust the order of the dimensions, we can get this cool acronym called RATER. So if you're researching the dimensions of service quality and it's not called RATER, it's because this, the 5 dimensions of service quality is the science, the acronym RATER is us helping us to teach it to you, how to understand it, right? So the first one of the RATER is reliability, and that's the ability to perform the promised service dependently and accurately, right? So reliability, and that shouldn't be any news to us. Now the assurance probably is a bit of a news to you. That's the knowledge and courtesy of the employees and their ability to convey trust and confidence. Now assurance is a kind of a cool thing, but it also touches on seller competence or seller competence. So how our customers perceive how competent our service employees are is going to impact their perception of service quality. Right? Another one is tangibles, and we've dealt before with the servicescape and the physical elements of the service experience. So, and that's the appearance of physical facilities, equipment, personnel, communication, materials. So services are naturally intangible, so the things that we put in there with tangible is going to help them to perceive, adjust their perceptions of service quality. Empathy, the provision of caring, individualised attention to the customer. This is for our service staff. Comes back to what's it called? Customer service, right? So empathy. If you're employing people which are very rational and strategic and stuff, that can be really good for business management, but they might not have the empathy required for frontline, that boundary spanning role in actually dealing with customers. Because if we can't demonstrate empathy for our customers, who actually care about how they feel and about how they think and what their perception of us is, that's going to impact in a big way their perception of service quality. And the last one is responsiveness. And this is willingness to help customers and provide prompt service. So you can be really reliable, you can be really good at knowing what you do, assurance, that competence thing. You can have a really good service gate. You have a lot of empathy, but if you can't respond to it, if you just don't have that performance in there, you're not going to have that good service. So these things here come together. Now, it might not seem like it at the beginning, but these 5 dimensions of service quality actually do integrate with the ServQual model. So these are 2 models I want you to know. The Rater model, which is the dimensions of service quality, and the ServQual model, which is often called the GAP model. All right. Now, I don't have anywhere here the dimensions of service quality in there, although this thing is about service quality. But you can, if you spend a bit of time, you can actually infuse these dimensions of the Rater model, or the dimensions of service quality, into the ServQual model. They fit, right? Because a lot of it's examining the same stuff, so it shouldn't be any surprise to us that they do fit. Now, it's called the GAP model because it highlights the gaps between between the organisation, the marketer, and the customer, right? Really, these gaps are about perception, what it comes down to when you think about it. So I'm going to start with gap 1, and that's the difference between management's perceptions of consumer expectations and the customer's actual perceptions. So I've been talking to you for a while now about customer perceptions and how important they are. It's extremely difficult for us to know what our customers actually perceive. And that goes in for multiple reasons. First of all, is we're not in their head. Second of all, when we ask people what their perceptions are, it's not something that we often talk about. So our customers, if we go there, oh, what's your perception of service? They go, oh, I don't know. Like, how would you even communicate that? Like, that's not normal language that we talk about. So we go, well, we will use the 5 dimensions of service quality and go, well, what are your expectations on our reliability? And how would they know? How would they know what's normal? They need some kind of framework or benchmark to, first of all, form those expectations, but then it's extremely difficult then to communicate that. So that's another thing, right? Even further again, which is even more difficult, when people try and explain their psychological states, like their attitudes, their beliefs, their cognitive process and affective process, they're not trained psychologists either. So it's extremely difficult for them to communicate that. But then when we say things, we've got these latent motives or latent things, which are different than the manifesting. So the things that we actually say are actually different than what we're actually doing. So if I say to my customers, what's your expectations of my service? That they're not only thinking, oh, I want to be, give Kevin as accurate information as possible. They're like, well, I don't want to hurt Kevin's feelings, so I'm going to be nice to him as well. So what they actually think and feel and believe isn't necessarily what they are going to say either. So if someone goes, and just a classic example, if someone puts on a beautiful dress and they go, does this make my bum look big? What are you going to say? Like, if it does, everyone's going to say, no, you look great in that, right? Because, so what they actually think and what they actually say, might be different. Because they don't want to hurt your feelings or they don't know how to communicate it. Right, so the first gap then is a big one. Us, the marketers, what do we think? What's our perceptions of what our customers perceive of us? The gap 2 is the difference between what we think our customers perceive of us and how we can actually translate that into service quality specifications. Gap 3 is the service quality specifications and the actual delivery. So we might say to our to our employees, this is what you need to deliver to customers, but then they might not actually be able to deliver on our specifications of quality either, right? The gap 4 is then how we communicate that. So we could say, if you come in, this is what you can expect. So our communications have a big impact. We've covered this already on setting customer expectations. So there's going to be a gap there. Now gap 5, which is a massive one, the last gap, is the difference between the actual, well, we don't have actual service in this model, but imagine the actual service, so their perception of the actual service and their expectation of the service. So there's going to be a gap in there too, all right? So all these gaps then sort of emphasize where things can go wrong between the customer's perception and our perceptions, and how difficult in translating those perceptions into outcomes. So this is an excellent model. I recommend you use it. I did want to do an assignment where you apply this, but this service marketing is so big now, we can't do everything. So if you do end up in a situation where people are asking you to help you with their business, and you're dealing with consumer behaviour and people's perceptions of service quality, this is a really good one to help you with that, this gap model, to identify where things are going wrong. And then if you're trying to measure, I'm going to go back a slide there, if you're trying to measure service quality, or comprehend it, like what does it actually involve, use these dimensions, all right? Now, identifying and correcting service quality shortfalls. So the service organisation, there's 4 potential shortfalls that may lead to the gap between what customers expect and what they receive. So the first one is not knowing what customers expect, specifying the service standards that do not accurately reflect what management believes the customer's expectations to be, service performance does not match the expectations, and not living up to the levels of service performance that are promoted and promised by marketing communications. Now, if you just realise that they were the 4 gaps that I talk about from the marketer's side, good on you, because that's what they are. Bang, 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 bang. Right? And gap 5 is the difference. We spent most of the lecture series talking about the difference between customers' perceptions and expectations. Perceptions of service and expectations of service. All right, now customer satisfaction information system. So organisations that are known for excellent service are good at listening to the voice of their customers and to their customer contact employees, which are the boundary men, their frontline staff, their customer service personnel, right? So this can come through different ways. So analyse it. So this customer satisfaction information system. So I've explained how important that is, and a lot of what we do in marketing is to increase satisfaction and customer loyalty, because that's how we develop valuable relationships with them. Excuse me. So we can analyse information to help us make those decisions. And that includes complaints. Customers that actually complain are good for us because they put the effort in. They care enough about our business to actually tell us what we're doing wrong so that we can improve it, right? Post-transaction surveys, similar to guest requests. Ongoing surveys of account holders using scientific sampling procedures to determine customer satisfaction. And I'm going to teach you how to do that in marketing research, and we cover that a bit in consumer behaviour as well. So consumer behaviour goes into a bit more detail, the psychology of customer satisfaction, and marketing research goes into more detail how to actually measure that. Employee surveys determine perceptions of quality of service. Focus group interviews to examine key issues in depth. So the surveys will identify the issues and the focus groups will help us to understand them. Mystery shopping to determine the service behaviour of individual employees, so it's like a quality checking thing. Competitive market surveys to compare service performance with the market, which is like our environmental scanning type thing, as in like where are we in the marketplace. Now, service guarantees. Service guarantees are explicit promises made to customers about the level of service they can expect to receive. So these researchers point out the service guarantee should be unconditional, easy to understand and communicate, meaningful, easy to evoke, and easy to collect when compensation is due. Now I want you to think about an example of that. I'm going to give you 3 seconds, 3, 2, 1, and who came up with Domino's Pizza? I did. If basically their promise is if it's not delivered in a certain amount of time, you get the pizza free or something like that. I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but that is one example of doing the service guaranteed. Now there's plenty others, and again I like to put the link the concepts on the slide with the research that's been published, so you know that the things that we talk to aren't actually us making up on the spot. It comes from scientific research. Right, so that's it for this week. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next week's lectures.